Right? Is it on? Good. Very good. After 5 minutes again there will be demands. Right? So let us continue with what we have been discussing. As you can see, almost on a daily basis the articles are coming. Today also there are articles about these freebies. Right? So let us proceed and look at what we have been analyzing. So we have seen ethical, and we are looking at economic and administrative, political aspects of these subsidies. So proceeding further, we are looking at what is a merit and what is a non-merit subsidy. And what we have said is that a merit subsidy is the one which is essential for the livelihood of people. That means if they are not given, there is every danger that people cannot sustain their life in a dignified manner. As we said, right to life and liberty, Article 21 gives a fundamental right to the people also. But again, the question here is, even these merit subsidies also, for how long can we give, and how to sustain them, how to finance them, and when to stop them. These are all the things that we have to look at. And more importantly, what could be the future? These are all the things let us try to analyze. So the government is giving subsidies on say electricity and water irrigation. Right? The government is giving subsidies on electricity or water irrigation. This electricity for farmers as well as households. Right? Again, irrigation for farmers as well as households. Right? And then please remember, these schemes like NREGA are also part of this subsidy culture only. Why? Because through NREGA you are creating artificial employment where none exists. Are you creating any assets? Are increasing productivity? If you are creating assets or if you are increasing productivity, then you can call NREGA capital expenditure. It will not become part of either subsidies or freebies or anything else. But are we creating? Then housing schemes. Housing schemes. Please remember, this was asked in your ethics case study also before last year. Housing schemes. Should the government be spending money on these housing schemes? Should the government be constructing houses for the poor people? It is also subsidy. It is also a subsidy. Housing schemes. And then this construction of toilets. It is also a subsidy. Anything that is given free of cost to the people is called a subsidy. Money transfer. Anything that is given free of cost to the people. Right? And as we discussed, this drinking water or even the medicines that are given to the people. And then this Food Security Act, under which PDS food grains are given to poor people. All of them are part of subsidies only. All of them are part of subsidies only. So how to differentiate, as I said, how to differentiate what is a merit and a non-merit subsidy? From economic point of view, it is very easy, because all subsidies are non-merit only. From an economic point of view. Why? Because cost benefit analysis. What is the amount of money the government is spending, and what is the amount of money government is getting in return? From cost benefit perspective, none of these subsidies merit any kind of attention on the part of the government. Why? Because economic point of view, it is only about transfer of money, as we said, transfer payments from the government to the people. And the amount of money spent by the government on say law and order, is the government charging anything from the people? It is an expenditure on the part of the government. And is the government charging anything from the people? Obviously not. Amount of money spent by the government on defense. Amount of money spent by the government on defense. So for all these things, the government is not charging anything from the people, and it is not also getting anything in return also from the people, right? They are not getting anything in return. But these are all the functions which the government has to perform essentially. You cannot call them as what we call subsidies or freebies. Why? Because for any state to have its credibility, it must maintain law and order. It has to maintain law and order. So it cannot be considered any kind of freebie or subsidy. It cannot be considered any freebie or subsidy. On the other hand, rest of all of them can be called subsidies. Rest of all. Should the government be constructing houses for the poor people? Should the government be constructing houses for the poor people? Going by the ethical perspective, the right to life includes right to have dignified existence. So, can you be residing on the roads? Obviously not. So, you must construct houses. You must give houses to people. Right to life includes right to have safe drinking water. Then also it cannot be called subsidy. Right to life includes again right to have dignified existence. So electricity. So from that perspective, everything can be justified. But the question is how to justify these subsidies in the long term, especially from economic perspective. As it has been rightly pointed out, these freebies are never free. The term itself is a misnomer. The term itself is a misnomer. It is never free. It can never be free. Why? Because the money is not coming from the pockets of the political leaders who announce these subsidies. It is not coming from the pockets of political leaders. So from where does this money come from? It comes from people only. So in the first place itself, in the beginning itself, we say that these freebies are never free. They are never free. Now, if this is the case, why do people want these subsidies, freebies? Why do they want freebies? Why? Because it is the lack of awareness among the people. This is where the most important problem here is. Lack of awareness among the people about how these subsidies are financed. How these subsidies are financed. Lack of awareness. And that is the reason why you can see in all those states where these free subsidies are given, the administered prices of the government are always very high. What do you mean by administered prices? The prices which are not determined by the markets, but which are decided by the government. For example, petrol and diesel. In all these states where these freebies are given, whether it is Tamil Nadu or Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, or all these states, Punjab, the petrol prices are very, very high. Why? Because the state governments are imposing huge amount of taxes. Yeah, but they are imposing huge amount of taxes. That means on the one hand they are giving it to the people, on the other hand they are taking away from the people. So the first and foremost problem with the subsidies is that, as we say with the democracy, as we studied also, cognitions, lack of awareness. People simply don't have any kind of awareness about, from where and how these subsidies are financed. And they believe that if the money is coming into their pocket, it means that the government is giving this money to them free of cost. It means that the government is giving this money to them free of cost. As we have said, nothing is free. Nothing can ever be free also. Nothing is free. Nothing can ever be free also. So at the end of the day, it is only the people who pay for all these so-called subsidies, either in terms of very high prices, administered prices, or in terms of very high taxes, or future generations in the form of very high and unsustainable debt levels. That is what first and foremost we must make people realize. We must make people realize. And proceeding further, the question again we have to ask here is, for how long should we give these subsidies? For how long should we give these subsidies? For example, take the case of a PDS, public distribution system, right? Take the case of a PDS. This PDS in India was started. It was started during the world wars, during the British times. You study about these things again in your economy. It was during the world wars, especially during the Second World War, during the Great Bengal Famine, when people did not have anything to eat. That is when the government has extensively started this public distribution system to provide subsidized food grains. From then onwards, we are providing now, even now also. So 100 years, almost more than 90 years, we have been providing, right? Did we remove poverty? Did we remove poverty? Did we remove hunger? So obviously, these subsidies or freebies provide only immediate short-term relief. Immediate short-term relief to the people. They provide only immediate and short-term relief to the people. Immediate short-term relief. Can this immediate short-term relief be made permanent? Can this immediate short-term relief be made permanent? Obviously, it cannot. It cannot be what we call a permanent solution. It cannot be a permanent solution. Why? Because for how long you have to provide these subsidies? For how long? As long as people are poor. As long as people are poor. As we study, this is very important. This is where we are caught in this vicious cycle of poverty, hunger, and subsidies. We are caught in this vicious cycle of poverty, hunger, and subsidies. So what we are saying here is that since the people are poor, how we are justifying them? Since people are poor, we are giving subsidies. Why? Because it is the moral responsibility of the state. It is the moral responsibility of the state to protect poor people. It is the moral responsibility of the state to provide immediate relief to the people, poor people, from the vagaries of market, from the uncertainties of market. It is the moral responsibility of the state. As I said, right to life and liberty. That is the reason why we are giving subsidies. Now, what economists say that since subsidies are given, people are poor. That is what they say. Since subsidies are given, people are poor. That is what the economists say. This is the vicious cycle that we have to talk about. Since subsidies are given, people are poor. What do we mean by that? So, how to remove this poverty of people? How can we remove poverty of people? Simple economics. How to remove poverty? You can remove poverty of people by making poor people rich. Simple. Right? By making poor people rich. Right? Exactly. I am coming to that. Right? How can you make poor people rich? How can you make poor people rich? Very good. Right. Yeah. For how long? For how long? For how long? As long as they are alive. Unfortunately, they don't die. And when they are alive, unfortunately, they don't sit idle. They increase population also. Right? Bihar and UP. they increase population also. And that means their children should be provided, their grandchildren, their great grandchildren. For how long? Right? So by giving subsidies, you cannot make poor people rich. Right? By giving subsidies, what you are doing, you are only providing a temporary relief from poverty. Temporary relief from poverty. Temporary relief from poverty. Right? Does it make them rich? Obviously not. Then how can you make them rich? When do you become rich? Of course, for you people right now it is difficult to imagine also, but still you can try. When do you become rich? Get into IRS IT and become rich. Income tax. Yes, you may, okay, by making them independent. When do you become independent? Take your own case now. When do you become independent? Right now, you are hopelessly dependent. Right? So when do you become independent? When do you become independent? Yes, when do you become independent? Pardon? Yeah, when do they get opportunity? Yes, you become independent when you start earning your livelihood. Right? Very good. When can you earn your livelihood? When can you earn your livelihood? When you get employment, right? When you have productive employment, right? Simple economics. And when can you have productive employment? When will you have productive employment? Can the government provide jobs to everyone? No. NREGA. Through NREGA, government can provide jobs to everyone. NREGA jobs are given only for 100 days. That too, one member in a family. What about the rest of the members will do? What about that person who gets 100 days of employment, remaining to 65 days? What will he do? Prepare for UPSC. Right? So what, how do they get employment then? That is what we say, supply side and demand side. From supply side, the person must have the necessary skills that are demanded by private sector. You must have the necessary skills so that you can get productive employment. From the demand side, private sector must create jobs. Right? Private sector must create jobs. Government cannot provide employment to every person. Private sector must create jobs. Right? From demand side. Right? Now, if the private sector has to create jobs, come this side. If private sector has to create jobs, when can the private sector create jobs? When can the private sector create jobs? When they invest in their industries. When they invest in their industries. When they invest in their industries. Right? If they increase their investment, automatically it can result in more employment also. When they increase their investment, it will improve their employment also. Right? Then the question is, when do they invest more? When do they invest more? When there is demand for their products. Right? When there is a demand for their products. When will there be any demand for their products? When will there be demand for their products? Only when people have income. When will people have income? When they have employment. This is what we call vicious cycle of poverty. Vicious cycle of poverty. So which one is earlier and which one is later? Employment or demand? Unless people have employment, they don't have income. Unless they have income, there will not be demand for goods and services. Unless there is demand for goods and services, there will not be any investment. Unless there is investment, there will not be any employment. Then what is the solution? Are you getting the point here? Right? What is the solution then? What is the solution then? Can subsidies, pardon? Increase? I did not get it. Make in India. Very good. Get lost. India. Get lost India. Right. Right. So at the end of the day, as we say all the time, everything depends on investment. Investment. For any country to grow rapidly, everything depends on investment. So this investment can come from government and the private sector and foreign sector in the age of globalization. It can come from either the government or the private sector or foreign sector. When will the private sector invest? As we have said, only when there is demand, right? And the private sector also will invest only when there is infrastructure available. Infrastructure available. What do you mean by infrastructure? We are talking about two things: physical infrastructure and social infrastructure. Private sector will invest only when there is both physical and social infrastructure. Physical infrastructure in the form of roads, electricity, water, buildings, communication, transportation. Right? For example, you are producing something in Haryana and you are exporting it. And how do you export it? Mostly overseas only. Right? So from Haryana, you are going all the way to Gujarat, taking your product to Gujarat. From there, the port, you will be exporting it. Is there any sea near Haryana? Not at all. So when you are taking all this way, what is required here is you need better transportation facilities. Transportation facilities. Take the case simple here. A truck in United States of America per day, they travel at least minimum 700 to 800 kilometers in a day, because the roads are very good. In India, 200 kilometers means 1 light year. Right? Infrastructure. Infrastructure. Say the case of port in USA ports in India. For loading and unloading in India, it takes minimum 28 days. You are taking your product, you are putting it to the ships, loading. Whatever that has come in the ship, unloading. It will take 28 days. Right? In America, it takes only 24 hours. Why? Why? Because infrastructure. Infrastructure. So the private sector will have to, will invest only when there is infrastructure. Do we have infrastructure in our country? Obviously not. So what is the government doing to incentivize the private sector to invest in the economy? The government is giving private sector subsidies. What we call them as tax subsidies. Are these tax subsidies merit subsidies? Are they merit subsidies? For example, 2019, before Corona, BC means before Corona, right? We are yet to come to AD after the death of Corona, right? Before Corona, 2019, the government of India had reduced the corporate tax, right? And the government of India had given around 1.8 lakh crores of rupees of tax subsidies to the corporates. Can we call this as merit subsidy? Should we call it as merit subsidy? The government says that it is a merit subsidy. And welfare economy says that it is only freebies given to the corporate sector. And can you revive investment through these tax subsidies? Should you revive investment through these tax subsidies? Should we revive investment through these tax subsidies? Similarly, state governments also indulge in what you call competitive taxation policies. In order to attract investment, the state governments cut down the taxes that are imposed on industrial sector. Right? That is also part of subsidies. That is also part of subsidies. Are these subsidies justified? Are these subsidies justified? So we are looking at all types of subsidies. The subsidies that are given not only to the poor people, subsidies that are given to the rich people also. Are these subsidies justified? The government says that they are justified. And if you look at it, if you look at the budget of India, every year the government of India is losing around 5 lakh crores of rupees. 5 lakh crores of rupees as taxes because of the subsidies given to the so-called rich people. When we are talking about these freebies, why don't we talk about the freebies given to the rich people? That is the counter argument. That is the counter argument. Should we focus on reviving investment and ensuring growth by giving subsidies to the rich people? That is the question that we have to ask. Right? When we are talking about subsidies given to the poor people, we should also be talking about subsidies given to the rich people. The government says that we are giving these subsidies to the rich people because rich people would invest in the economic system and they would create employment. Is this the way to incentivize the rich people? Then what is the way to incentivize the rich people? How to incentivize the rich people? By improving infrastructure, by creating manpower, by coming out with a very simple and stable tax regime. This is how we have to do it. Did the government create infrastructure? Did the government create any infrastructure? As I said, compared to developed countries. And then, since the government is giving so many subsidies, the government has to collect money from the people. How? Through taxes only. Through taxes only. So at the end of the day, what is happening? Even investment is also not improving, because the private sector will not invest just because the government has given you tax subsidies. They will invest only when? They will invest only when? Only when? Only when there is a demand, there is infrastructure, and there is manpower. So these subsidies also cannot be justified. The subsidies given to the rich people can also be justified. Then what is the solution? That we can see tomorrow, because time is up, right? As you can see, there are so many dimensions to all these subsidies. There are so many dimensions to all these subsidies. Yeah. There are also subsidies. Yeah. Yeah, there are also anything which distorts the price mechanism is called a subsidy. Anything which distorts the price mechanism, anything which comes in the way of the market forces is always a subsidy. Special economic zone is also a subsidy. Anything. Pardon? I did not get it. Yeah, how to incentivize infrastructure, that we will see tomorrow, not by giving subsidies. Yes. They are same. Subsidies, freebies, revenue culture, whatever you want to say, everything is the same. Yeah. Which one? SEZs. As I said, anything that distorts the price mechanism is always not good. That's what I am saying. We can justify everything, but at the end of the day, they are not good. Right? So let us come back and look at what